You were here long before any of us were here.
A warm welcome from President Donald Trump in 2017. Navajo code talkers, heroes, invited to the White House. Then, shock this week. The Department of Defense removing their service from its websites. Pentagon Secretary John Elliott defending his agency's actions, telling KOAT in part, "We salute them for their strong and in many cases heroic service to our country, full stop." DEI, discriminatory equity ideology, does the opposite. It divides the force, erodes unit cohesion, and interferes with the service's core warfighting mission. The word Navajo was targeted using artificial intelligence and an automated review process, which was done from President Trump's directives on DEI.
Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. I cannot believe we still have to talk about this. After the Trump administration ordered the Department of Defense to stop teaching new Air Force recruits about the Tuskegee Airmen, the first unit that accepted black pilots during World War II, the outcry was so loud that the Defense Department had to backtrack. After they removed a webpage detailing the heroism of Charles Rogers, the highest-ranking Black Medal of Honor recipient, the public reaction was so furious that they had to restore it, but not before adding the words DEI medal to the description. And now we're learning that the DoD has removed references to baseball great Jackie Robinson, who served his country as an Army second lieutenant during World War II, and the Navajo Code Talkers, a group of extraordinarily brave Native Americans without whose unique skills America's Pacific Campaign might have failed altogether. I asked Bobby Jones, retired Navy commander and frequent guest here, to explain just how high the stakes are when we start erasing our own history.
My name is Bobby Jones. I'm a retired Navy commander and former task group commander. I am also president of Veterans for Responsible Leadership. The clip you just saw is disturbing. It's disturbing not just because it's the deletion of American heroes. It's quite simply the erasure of American history. You are looking at one of the most iconic photos of the 20th century and one of the most revered photos in American military history. This is the flag raising at the summit of Mount Suribachi during the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945. The battle, which lasted for days, was some of the fiercest fighting, both in weapons and hand-to-hand combat, the world had ever seen. This was the last major stop before American bombers would be within range of bombing the Japanese home islands. This critical battle would not have been nearly close to successful without the contributions of the men mentioned in that video, the Navajo Code Talkers. In the first 48 hours, they were able to transmit over 800 messages flawlessly and efficiently. Most of the messages they transmitted lasted less than 20 seconds in the heat of intense combat. Without their contributions, the battle would have been lost, according to their commanding officer. And how were they repaid for these critical contributions? Well, their entire existence was basically denied for up to 2 decades. It wasn't until 1968 that the world found out about who they were and what they did. Now, yes, that's glory denied, but most importantly, they were not allowed to use their GI benefits for the longest time because of that denial. They simply continued to love a country that historically, since the 1600s, did not love them back. I wish that I could say that such incidents were just limited to the Navajo, but that is not true. Let's go back one more World War and look at World War I. Pictured here is the group colloquially known as the Harlem Hellfighters, a complete regiment of African-American infantrymen who went to fight in what was then called the Great War, now known as World War I. And to show you how much they were loved and appreciated by America at that time, they left a very segregated country to arrive on the beaches and sands of Europe to be told by their commanding general, John Pershing, "We don't want you. Go fight with the French. We don't believe that you have what it takes to be victorious in combat." Well, the Harlem Hellfighters did exactly that. They went and they fought for the French. and logged a then record 191 days of continuous straight combat in trench warfare. They became the most decorated unit of World War I, winning many and numerous awards for gallantry and bravery from the French. The United States of America did not even recognize their contributions initially when they were engaged in some of the fiercest fighting in World War I. They came back home and got a parade down the streets of Harlem. But after that, many of them were caught in the Red Summer, where racial animus was raised to an unbelievable degree, with some of them actually lynched in uniform. Unfortunately, they were also deleted from the Department of Defense website initially. As a matter of fact, many things were deleted from the Department of Defense website to include references to this report, the 1925 Army War College Report on Negroes. So after the Harlem Hellfighters established a very high ceiling for combat excellence, what did the United States Army do? They released this report. In it, you can see for yourself the blatant lies that were created, not based on combat experience, not based on lessons learned, but on emotion and racism. The lack of courage, the lack of intelligence, all of these things codified into the U.S. Army strategy for decades after the gallantry was displayed by groups like the Harlem Hellfighter. This was the reason why by the time World War II rolled around, and specifically African Americans had to make the decision to fight once again for a country that has made it blatantly clear that it was not loved by, they came up with the Double V campaign, victory at home and victory abroad. By the time the Tuskegee Airmen took to the skies of Europe in May of 1943, the scene both abroad and at home had to change as far as the military was concerned. This was a war of attrition, and quality mattered, not just what people looked like. And so you saw the Tuskegee Airmen in just 2 years fly over 1,500 combat missions, shooting down over 110 enemy aircraft, and the first recorded shoot downs of what we now refer to as jet fighters. They did so in propeller planes. The numerous citations they received have been well documented. The Distinguished Flying Crosses they received have been well documented. However, when those men came home from fighting that war and showing that excellence is the only thing that matters and that bullets don't discriminate, many of them, almost all of them, could not find a job flying for civilian airlines after the war, like many of their white counterparts. And now, once again, they were initially erased from the Department of Defense's website. The Tuskegee Airmen showed courage, grit, intelligence, and resiliency under pressure. But the planes that they flew were pretty dang good. And the reason those planes were pretty good in battle tested was thanks to the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, aka the WASP. Between 1942 and 1944, over 1,000 women served as pilots whose primary jobs were to test the new aircraft and to deliver them to the warfighter on the front. If it flew in World War II, they basically tested it and delivered it, to include the P-38, 39, P-51s, P-47s, the B-17, the B-24, and the B-29 Super Fortress. They literally had to test planes that had never been flown, designs that had never been checked out before, and it cost them. Over 30 of them died in service to our country, making sure that our men on the front lines had the best capable aircraft to go win a war. It wasn't until 1977 that the WASP were granted veteran status by the United States government. They too were initially erased from the Department of Defense's website. The picture you see here is not from Europe, but instead from America, specifically Nevada. This is an American internment camp that was set up to basically imprison Japanese Americans for no other reason but their ethnicity. It's the famous executive order that was signed by Franklin D. Roosevelt that basically removed the rights of Americans during World War II. The Japanese Americans had their property confiscated, their citizenship stripped, and their rights violated during this time period. Any group would have been well within their rights to be angry, to be bitter, to literally say the hell with this country and try to get out of here as soon as possible. Instead, these Americans created the 44th 2nd Regimental Combat Team. All Japanese Americans deploying to some of the most fierce fighting in World War II. And all they did in their time of being a unit was get 9,486 Purple Hearts, 21 Medals of Honor, and 8 Presidential Unit citations in under 3.5 years. It is quite honestly one of the most combat effective units ever created by the United States and the American military. And they did this while being recruited behind barbed wires. That is what I call patriotism. And to bring this full circle, the great nation of the United States of America wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for the dedication, diligence, and determination of a gay man. Let me take you back. It's the Revolution. It's the famous winter at Valley Forge. George Washington, desperate for a miracle, was seen on his knees praying to God for exactly that. Well, what God sent him was a Prussian military officer who had been drummed out of their military due to his orientation. Baron Friedrich von Steuben showed up at Valley Forge when America was at its lowest point. You literally had revolutionary soldiers boiling their shoes to eat them for food. And all he did was come in and create the standards of which an American soldier will operate. Those standards taught to them allowed them to win a revolution that the world thought could never happen. His effective tactics were used so well and for so long. The Army still uses a variation of his basic training tactics today. It's just been updated many times. For lack of a better term, a gay man was the Army's first non-commissioned officer and played that role in training. So when I see these attempts to whitewash history, to create the American myth instead of telling the American truth, I'm bothered. I'm bothered by it personally, but I'm bothered by it just for historical accuracy. Because the reality of the situation is these people who have been erased due to callousness and culture wars put it all on the line for a country that really did not want to put it on the line for them. But most importantly, they put it on the line so we as the descendants of these actions can do exactly what the founding fathers said that they wanted to do. They knew they weren't perfect, but they wanted future generations to have an opportunity to form a more perfect union. The way you get there is by telling the truth about how we got here. The whole truth. Acknowledging the contributions of the people who are quiet and are under limestone graves in rows at Arlington. Telling why their success, why their accomplishments are so important. To do that, you've got to tell the story of what they had to overcome. President Trump and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, don't want Americans to know what they had to overcome because it makes America look bad. No, it makes America look imperfect. If anything, their struggle should be highlighted as how America should go about doing its business. We find something wrong, we fight to overcome it, and we make it better for the next generation. The fact of the matter is, a man who had his opportunity to serve five times during the Vietnam era and deftly dodged it, should not even feel he should be in the same sentence as the people that I just highlighted. And the thing is, America, he realizes that we don't know our history. He realizes that, which is why he thinks he can get away with it. But I'm willing to bet that America, our allies, we do remember our history. We do. We just need to talk about it more. America's never tried to be perfect. America's just tried to be better. And the people who he's erasing from history, specifically military history, gave their lives for America to be better.